Lars.
Last time.
Lars. I don't know. Morning all, it's the game day warm-up on talkSPORT. Max, Rushden and Perry Groves with you until 11. Lars Sivertsen with us after that humiliating defeat in How Tall Are They? And knowing you as well as I do, Lars, I suspect you are genuinely kicking yourself at being so far out on the height of Mark Overmars.
Yeah, but was definitely Googling images of Mark Overmars standing next to people during the news and sport there. I don't know. I just had him mentally pegged as someone who's like a little bit taller than the average winger. You know, he is a very
you
upright.
thought he was a little bit taller, but he was a little bit smaller.
Well, maybe it's my whole Norwegian background. I'm in Norway at the moment, where people generally are a little bit taller than in the UK. So maybe this is playing a part here.
It's the How Tall Are They version of recency bias. You've been looking at tall people. It's like you can't even envisage anybody would be under 6 foot. The thought of it is just too much. Surrounded by Vikings.
Is this you know, How Tall Are They, Max? Is this not the equivalent quiz of the championship, where you don't know who's going to beat who? Do you know what I mean? It's like Lars is prepared. He's actually the founder of How Tall Are They, and Andy Jacobs, let's be honest, couldn't really give a rat's backside, could he? Do you know what I mean? It was like, he's only just got up. He's not even prepared. He can't remember how tall he is himself. Do you know what I mean? And he's won it 2-0 away from home.
That's a very good point you make. It is in many ways the best league in the world, isn't it? And also there's no VAR, which is why people often
flows
prefer it
better.
to autobiography.
Exactly.
It does flow more than autobiography was. Who's got the biggest mission then, Lars, in the Premier League games today? There's lots of them.
Yeah, it's got to be Leicester for me, and it is a little bit of an obvious one, picking whoever's playing away to Liverpool. But we're just adding the fact that it's Leicester who have conceded 7 goals in their last 2 games. They have had a really bad time away to Newcastle. They're not the only team in the season that's going to have a bad time away to Newcastle, but losing 3-0 at home to Wolves was a little bit dispiriting. I didn't think they were. I mean, it's one of those games where the first 4 shots Wolves had, of those 3 went in. So it's not ideal from Leicester from that point of view. But there was some pretty goofy defending and some iffy goalkeeping there. So they're going to have to shape up pretty quickly if they're going to get out of this encounter with Liverpool with any kind of dignity left, I think.
Do you think, Lars,
the neutrals, Perry? Carry on, Perry.
I was going to say, Lars, do you think that RVN's going to go with a back 5? Because the back 4 just didn't work. Well, you got Connor Cody, who hasn't got a lot of pace. You got Vestergaard, who hasn't got a lot of pace. And one thing Liverpool have in those forward areas is pace.
And that was obviously clearly on display against Spurs because of their sort of incredibly high line. And we just saw there's so many guys who can run in the Liverpool front line. So the idea of them having at Connor Cody and Yannick Vestergaard seems not great. I mean, Leicester obviously you'd think will not keep a super high line because that'd be crazy, but still there's only so much protection. And also I just kind of felt for Danny Ward, who obviously isn't, he's not super match sharp in goal and seemed to have a really bad time of it against Wolves. So that whole setup, a slightly rusty Danny Ward in goal with Connor Cody and Yannick Vestergaard in front of him, I really think that could spell quite a lot of goals for Liverpool if they play anywhere near their usual standards. So the temptations to add another player in there for Van Nistelrooy will, that would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose Leicester could look at how Spurs almost got something from that game against Liverpool and
Max, I was there, Max. They didn't. Liverpool could have gone on to another level and scored another 3 or 4. Honestly,
no, I know. It could have been 100.
Yeah,
couldn't it? Well, look. We've talked about them a bit already, but let's, Lars. I don't know what your thoughts are on Spurs at Forest. That's live on talkSPORT at 3.
Well, I think Forest is a really interesting one because Forest, I kind of. It's potentially really embarrassing for Spurs, right? Because you're coming up against Nuno, who was very unceremoniously kicked out of the building after not being there for very long at Tottenham, and it kind of plays the sort of very reactive, sort of low block counter attack thing that Spurs wouldn't want to do. But I also kind of think that a good Nuno team, which Nottingham Forest is right now, is kind of a pretty awkward tactical matchup for Anderson Tottenham because they're going to sit back, they're going to soak up all the pressure. They're really dangerous on counterattacks and very, very obviously it'd be a very different game to the Liverpool game. But it's one of those where Spurs, I'm sure they will have quite a lot of initial early chances. They tend to fly out of the block, Spurs. They tend to commit a lot of people up the field. Forest are going to sit back and try to soak up that pressure. If they don't get a goal in the first sort of 20 minutes, they could be so vulnerable on the counter here. Forest also strong on set pieces where Spurs are not always the best. So this seems like just a massive banana skin for Spurs, and it's just added embarrassment. I think it would be a huge loss of face to lose to a very functioning Nuno Espirito Santo team, given how the short shrift he was given at White Hart Lane.
Well, the thing is, you've got Nottingham Forest with Nuno. They are very well structured. You know, whether he went 3 at the back in the last game, wherever he goes, the 2 centre halves, Milenkovic and Murillo. Do you know what I mean? They give them that foundation, and Elanga's in really good form.
Yeah, Elanga's fast, as is Hudson-Odoi, and Gibbs White is a confident runner with the ball as well. So they've got a really good mix of the sort of experience and sort of canny centre forward play of Chris Wood with some speedy guys who can run around him. And I just really. If Spurs get an early goal, then doesn't need to be super complicated for them. But Forest don't concede many. They're really well structured and the danger's on the break. So it feels potentially really awkward for Spurs. This.
Everton, the next side to get a morale-boosting win against Man City. That's live on talkSPORT, 12:30, where game day begins. How do you see this one?
I mean, possibly. I think this might be a slightly better one for. Remember the last time they won in the Premier League, City was at home to Nottingham Forest, wasn't it? And Nottingham Forest and Everton have some things in common, which is that Everton also sit back. They also sit in a low block, a solid structure. They don't aim to have the ball a lot. They've had games recently where their pass completion rate has been like 71-72%, which means that more than 1 of every 4 passes goes astray. So this will be a game where City presumably will be allowed to pass the ball around a lot, which I think favors them a little bit. I thought Ilkay Gundogan spoke pretty well after the Juventus game about how it's a problem for them if they lose the ball all the time, because then they have to run back, and that's not really what they're designed to do. They're designed to control possession, control proceedings, and I do think against Everton they will be allowed to do that. So I tend to think, with no slight on Everton, I think this is one where the problems we've seen from City of the midfield not being able to compete, where everyone having to run too much, that might not be as much of an issue against Everton, who are going to sit back. And I also think if they give away some chances to Everton have a huge problem finishing their chances. They're just not very efficient. They missed a lot of chances. It feels like a brave call, Max, but I think Man City will actually win a game of football today.
Lars, you said about Everton missing chances. Their XG is like ridiculous. 2 teams that don't struggle to score goals. Newcastle. I think the game of the day could be Newcastle against Villa. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to be at Portman Road. I know that Isak got all the headlines quite rightly because of his hat-trick, but Sandro Tonali was absolutely outstanding because Eddie Howe's just tweaked his position.
Yeah, no, he played slightly further forward, didn't he? I mean, I didn't watch the full game, I only saw the highlights, but it seemed to be. And that's
no, he played deeper.
Me.
He was playing as the pivot. He played deeper.
All right,
yes. He's playing that little bit deeper.
Because the question has always been, how do you make him and Bruno Guimaraes fully work together? Because they are a little bit similar in the positions they want to take up and the roles they want to have in the team. But obviously, Tonali's had such a rough time in England. You make this big transfer and then you're banned for so long, and then this season it's like he's clearly a brilliant player, but he's been struggling to really find his place. So that's interesting that you were there and that really fell into place. I think it's going to be a great midfield battle, if anything. Like, I mean, if you've got Onana and Boubacar Tamara and possibly Tielemans on one side, and then Guimaraes and Sandro Tonali and possibly Joelinton on the Newcastle side, those are really good midfields. Like, these are all players who I think would not look out of place in one of the so-called top 6 teams. So I think that should be a feisty part of it. And it kind of comes down, he might come down to the strikers this a little bit. Isak is one of those. He's a little bit inconsistent, but on his day, he's one of the best around. I definitely think he's someone who has a sort of massive potential golden boot campaign in him at some point of his time in England, if he can put it together for a full season. But then, of course, Duran has been this sort of unhinged goal-scoring phenomenon for Villa if he plays, and if he doesn't, Ollie Watkins not so bad either. So you're right, this should be a tremendous game.
If you wanted to pick out one more game for us, to keep our eyes on, Lars, which would you pick from
one more game to keep an eye on? I mean, I am a little fascinated by Chelsea Fulham. Just then, in case this is the opposites in this case of Chelsea, who have done better than I think most, if not all, people thought they would this season, and they deserve credit for that. But they have also done better, having signed all the players. Like, they've spent so much money, and the medium-term implications of that, PSR-wise, and all the rest of it, are still, to be unfolded. But for now, I think Enzo Maresca deserves a lot of credit for arriving on an 11 and a style that kind of works for them. Then Fulham, on the other side, have kind of been building more quietly. And the thing that fascinates me about Fulham is that when Mitrovic left, we all figured, Mitrovic leaves, they will never score goals again. Seem to just kind of figure that out. Palhinha sold this summer. We all think, well, that midfield's not going to hang together without Palhinha, and they just kind of effortlessly finds a way to replace them. So without making big flashy signings, and with a lot of people who have a point to prove, a lot of players who've not had a great time elsewhere, be it Alex Iwobi, be it Adama Traore, the guys in there who, Smith Rowe, of course, who had a lot of injuries at Arsenal, they seem to be doing really well at picking up players who are kind of undervalued where they are and putting them into a system where they really work. Difficult to play away at Stamford Bridge, obviously, but I think, Fulham deserves some credit.
Do you know what? Fulham, as you said there, Lars, will hurt you going forward. You mentioned Alex Iwobi. As a goon, obviously, which I am, he used to really frustrate me at Arsenal because he had talent and technique, but he was like a bee that was buzzing about that had no sting. He just used to sort of peter out. Now, he's actually added some assists and some goals, and you've got Anthony Robertson, because I think he'll be the next cab off the rank from Fulham. I think one of the big boys are coming for Anthony Robertson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very, very good fullback. I also, being Norwegian, have to flag up. I think Sanderberg has done a really good job replacing.
How tall is he, Lars?
Well, he is quite tall, actually. Like he's
6'4".
He's 6'3", 6'4" thereabouts. Now, I'm in Norway, and at the weekend we had the national team manager in the Premier League studio, sort of pontificating this, which is really, really good. They had the actual national team manager in the studio talking about things, and Sanderberg got injured in his game, and you actually had him texting his own player almost during the broadcast, asking, "Are you okay?" he was a bit nervous about
the just a load of crying emojis, was it? It was like
He said it was he took a little bit of a painful one, but he was expecting to be back here, so we'll see how that goes.
Hey Lars, always good to have you on. I suppose if Iwobi was a bee with no, you don't really know when a bee is near you, if it has a sting or not, unless it stings you and die, right? So you just don't. You wouldn't know if Iwobi had a sting until
you knew if you watched Iwobi play. Trust me, you knew that there was no sting. Ask Arsenal fans, honestly. Trust me. Right, if he had a sting, Lars, he didn't use it.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.